Hi, welcome everybody, and welcome to those of you who are joining us online. I hope everybody's had a fruitful educational morning. I remind you that right now the theme that we're kind of discussing is cybersecurity and digital identities. So today we're here for this wonderful conference regarding the subject of introducing decentralized environmental verification. I'm very excited to bring up your speaker for today. Your speakers actually has in their bio that their life purpose is advancing the use of experimental tech to protect as little as, or as more than 10,000 nature reserves. It's a pretty kind of charged statement and one that I think is fantastic. So I'm excited to hear more. This person is the co-founder and CEO of Victoria Ecosystem in Victoria Land, AI for Climate, and the Christopher Córdova Agency, amongst many other organizations and companies. So without further ado, please help me welcome your speaker for today, Christopher Córdova.
Hello. I'm super happy to be here, my second time in Montreal. And well, I'm presenting today decentralized environmental verification. What does that mean? So, decentralized environmental verification is the opportunity to democratize and actually open the possibility for anyone, anywhere in the world, anytime, to help see and verify data related to nature. For example, right now we have carbon offsets, but we actually don't see the data. We need to see the data behind environmental claims, and that's what DEV is for. So decentralized environmental verification opens the possibility for you and me and anyone to see what is going on in nature, what is going on in the jungles, in the forests, in the mangroves, in the deserts, anywhere in the world. How can we achieve that? The way to go is, first of all, having more data about nature. At the moment, we have very little data from nature. And particularly, we don't have data streaming directly from nature constantly or permanently. But we do have rather a lot, information about humans. We can identify with a shocking degree of detail what anyone wants, what anyone wishes, what anyone says, what anyone has done online. We have a huge data footprint online, but that is not the case with nature. We do not know what is going on in the nearest forest, in the nearest coastline, in the nearest mangrove, desert again, coral reef at this moment. We don't have live data coming from there. So the first thing for decentralized environmental verification would be, of course, having more data, conducting a much more ambitious data effort. This leads us to transparency. What level of transparency do we need? Well, we need this level of transparency. We need the possibility to identify what is going on in nature at this very moment, and we need to be able to share it on our social media. Not just looking at it in a PDF report somewhere, in an institutional report somewhere, but actually accessing information and being able to share it on our social media anytime. For example, having the opportunity to see in real time or with as a greater frequency as possible photos, satellite images, videos, drone images, sensor readings from nature reserves around the world. So this brings us to a wonderful realization that we actually found out in Victoria Ecosystems, that also the carbon offset industry needed to have a revolution, a transparency revolution, that is. And the possibility to actually get there was, as I was saying, first of all, having more data. So conducting a far more ambitious data effort. Second, opening it. So having an open data, the world's first open data carbon offset. And then also paving the way for it to be Web3 native. What does this mean? Data without a context doesn't work as well as data with a context. So in order for us to actually make sense of data, we require a context. So Web3 will allow all these data sets to be geo-referenced. So we can have the opportunity to know not only what is going on, but also where that is happening and when, of course. So the time component and the geospatial component is an absolute revolution in the way we can look at data from nature. So why do we need this? Why is this important? Basically, because the biodiversity that sustains our life on this planet is still invisible to us. I have had the opportunity to visit nature reserves around the world for many years and to see for myself how the ecosystems are degrading, how they are changing, what is affecting them. And when you realize that they are invisible and that those things that you can see when you are there cannot be seen by anyone else, even when their lives depend on what is going on in those ecosystems, that really strikes you. So I realized that we actually need to make it visible. But visible really has to be at this level of data we're referring to. So we need at least 10 times more data from nature that we currently have if we want to actually make the right calls whenever we're thinking about restoring or helping an ecosystem. Because no industry on this planet works with as little data as the environmental initiatives trying to restore nature, if we compare them. I mean, imagine a factory. A factory actually takes decisions based on data. We cannot imagine they taking decisions just based on, I don't know, a couple of pictures or a couple of reports. No. They want data from the production line on real time. They want digital twins. So we already have digital twins in the industries. Why don't we have those in the forests? We already have smart cities. Why don't we have intelligent nature reserves? So that has been the commitment and the purpose of Victoria Ecosystems. We created this startup last year, and we're now working in different countries. And actually, at the moment, we are starting to oversee 5 nature reserves: Niger, France, Mexico, Ecuador, and Brazil. And we're starting to get satellite images, sensor readings, and also pictures from the areas, in some cases drone pictures and videos as well. The next step will be analyzing the information, identifying exactly what are the risks, what are the opportunities for the protection of those ecosystems. And then we'll come to the wonderful moment of actually copying what's going on in other industries, creating digital twins that can help us understand how the ecosystem changes within a day, within a week, within a year, within a decade. That is extremely important. The digital twins will help us to provide not only the world's most transparent carbon offsets, which we are already starting offering right now to clients, to corporate clients around the world, but also these digital twins are in themselves a digital asset, are in themselves a wealth of information that we can update permanently, as the digital twins are updated in the different industries, and we can identify those risks in real time, and we can work with authorities, with the communities, to actually support the protection of those ecosystems on real time. So that is the power, this is the level of impact that we can have. And our aim is to help protect or greatly improve the protection of nature reserves, of at least 10,000 nature reserves around the world. So, of course, it's quite ambitious, but it is not half as ambitious as what we need at the moment. We have not only a climate change crisis, but a biodiversity loss crisis that will, of course, directly impact, as it is doing, on the food security front. So, the legacy offset includes these three things. We got a carbon offset, a biodiversity offset, and a food security offset. Why? Because it is all linked. Because, of course, anything that alters, that changes the climate, and anything that tampers with biodiversity, of course, affects at the same time food security. That is, humanity's capacity to obtain enough nutritious food for all in the future. And the link is data. The way to go and the way we win this collective victory for humanity is making visible those ecosystems. And that we have to do, of course, with data. So that is the logical link that we followed. First of all, identifying the problem, then starting gathering data, then make it comprehensible, make it understandable, making it simpler at the same time, then creating this DEB data platform, and then opening up the possibility for anyone to start sharing the information we have there, so that actually anyone can help us verify it. That's what DEB is for, so that any 11-year-old can make his or her homework based on data streaming from nature reserves around the world, so that anyone, any professional, can actually use data for reports, for projects, for ideas, for proposals in the workspace, so that local governments can actually identify risks faster and act faster to restore nature, to help mitigate risks, so that any corporation can actually make better plans to intervene and to help restore nature in the communities they impact and they work on. So that we all can be certain that whenever we actually purchase a carbon offset or we support an environmental project, actually we know what is going on, and we can be certain that resources, any type of resources, are being applied the right way. And we can be certain that the health of that ecosystem is what the reports say, and not otherwise. We need this certainty, we need this transparency, and we need to make visible all the biodiversity and all the ecosystems that sustain our life on the planet. This is the aim of Victoria Ecosystems, and this is the website. You can enter the DEB data platform and start playing your part on data transparency and nature protection worldwide. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Do we have any questions to kick this off at this time? No? Okay. Christopher, thank you for that wonderful presentation. I'd like to ask you a personal question, if that's okay. Where did you grow up?
In Mexico.
And did that inspire you in any way to have these initiatives?
Certainly, because the huge biodiversity. It's the fourth most biodiverse country in the world. And well, during my childhood, of course, I was visiting nature reserves, nature sites with my family. And also the negative side of it. I mean, the huge dependence. I mean, the humongous dependence we have actually on nature. We depend on nature. So I really remember something that really marked me when there was a big flood in my hometown when I was a kid, and having to flee, having to move actually because of this gigantic flood. So that really marks you in terms of the vulnerability And when I started researching and learning that all around the world, there were so many communities vulnerable to one aspect or the other of climate change, that really strikes you. And afterwards, when you learn that those impacts also have a link to what happens in terms of food security and, of course, biodiversity, and the interaction between these three aspects, well, then you know there is something, and you know you have to try to work to identify those links and make them visible and tell everyone about what you have seen. And we are not seeing anything yet.
Well, I'm quite astounded by something you said, which is that the environmental sector is the industry that works with the least amount of data if you compare it to other industries. Why do you think that is? That seems pretty crazy, no?
It is absolutely crazy. It is absolutely crazy, but it is true. I mean, open up your mobile phone and Google anything about the city we are in, any community, anywhere in the world, any city, any human area that is connected online, which are most by now. We have lots of information, a shocking degree of detail, of data. We can know online what coffee you like.
Absolutely.
We have no idea what is going on at the chemical level on the nearest forest. We have no idea what is going on with the fungi, what is going on with the animals, if any migration pattern has changed lately over the past cycle. We don't know.
Do you think that's impacted by the kind of lack of interest in essentially caring for the environment because it's less lucrative or it's less commercial? Like, why do we think there's a lack of data and interest in that field?
Because we are wired to identify nature as a source of resources.
Right.
And ecosystems are as a source of resources, something to be managed, something to be administered, something to be exploited. Of course, that is the
Exploit
reality.
is the key word, isn't it?
That is the reality. But it is something we depend on. But we don't see it that way. We need to see it that way. And in order for us to see it that way, we actually need data. Otherwise, it is invisible. So that is the literal definition of what's going on. It is utterly invisible. We have no idea. How can you relate to something you don't see and you don't have the slightest notion of how it works? Yesterday, I was at the art exhibition at the vernissage here of the Congress about biological art, like bioart.
And so what is that?
It's extremely interesting.
Okay.
There were fungi talking to each other, basically communicating by impulses. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's like
It's a network.
it is a network. That is how you make it visible as well. Of course, we can use art. We can use all sorts of things, but we need data. At the end of the day, without data, we cannot relate. It is not possible to relate to something you don't see and you don't have a mental image of.
Yeah. You bring up an excellent point. Well, your whole presentation obviously is very poignant. What you mentioned something about the notion of, we have smart cities. Why can't we have smart forests or smart deserts or, any kind of natural ecosystem? What would a smart forest look like, for example? How would we extrapolate a smart city into nature?
We're doing that.
Okay.
We're working on that because it looks like exactly like a smart city. It gives you data as much as possible on real time. Otherwise, it starts basically building first the structure. And you need to start building the data structure first and then deploy all the systems so you can start getting data and actually having it on the right side of the furniture, so to speak. So it helps you grow a mental image of the forest, just as a smart city helps you grow a mental image of the city.
Yeah.
In such a way that you can plan ahead of things, that you can know what's going on, that you can react. So that's the key. It looks like that. It gives you data. It helps you make a mental image of it. It helps you act.
The countries you mentioned, France, Brazil, Niger, Mexico, and
Ecuador.
And Ecuador.
Yes.
are you in touch with those governments? Or are you dealing with NGOs? Or are you dealing with organizations in those countries? Who have you reached out to establish your connection and set up essentially data collection in those countries?
Landowners.
Landowners.
Yes.
Wow.
Private landowners.
Wow. So you're dealing with the
first of all.
private sector, not even with the public government sector. Like,
Indeed. We also have excellent relations
Okay.
with the public sector, of course, and we will be working with a lot of institutions around the world. But also the cornerstone is
yeah.
the landowners.
Landowners.
We need to include them.
Yeah.
We're working in a kind of Airbnb system in which we don't need to buy all the land assets in
Right.
order for us to protect them. We want to work with the landowners so they have a possibility to monetize the protection of their system, and we can do that through the monetization of data, and we do that through our carbon offset, biodiversity offset, and food security offset.
And so far, are you finding collaboration and cooperation when you're trying to create those new connections, or have people been resistant to any of these concepts?
It is very new.
Yeah.
To talk about decentralization
Sure.
in general
Yeah.
is very new. To talk about democratization of data, open data. I mean, even if we consider really carbon offset, an open data carbon offset, there is resistance to it.
I think anytime you mention open source, open data, transparency, some people get a little nervous.
There is resistance, but at the same time, there is hope there.
Sure.
I mean, we have to go that way. How on earth are we going to move forward on tackling climate change if we don't want to see the data? Come on, that is not going to happen.
Oh no, absolutely. But it gets me thinking, like, is there a correlation between populations that are, more marginalized or, from a more struggling socioeconomic status that are more concerned with environmental issues compared to a more privileged, affluent demographics who have less concern for this type of thing?
No,
Do you see a distinction?
I think concern is now widespread.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yes, luckily that is the case. I mean, we are all starting, if not started a long time ago, getting concerned
Sure.
about nature, about the state of the planet. That is one thing. The problem is actually we don't have data. We cannot
I
relate.
know.
We don't have
It's crazy.
the mental image of that forest. I mean, we have the paysage, we have the landscape view of the forests.
Yeah.
We even have the artistic part of it or the childhood stories part of it. We don't relate. We don't see it as close. We don't see it as us. So that is the problem.
I heard a great quote yesterday in one of the conferences. The speaker was talking about how do we protect biodiversity and the environment, and the key is to make people care about it. And right now there seems to be a lack of, we care about the environment. It's a hot topic issue. It's been brought up many times at this conference, even in the last 2 days, but there seems to be, from an individual perspective, a lack of liaison with the subject, right? So it's great what you're doing. It's fantastic. I want to ask you, Christopher, you're talking about decentralized environmental verification. Is there currently a centralized environmental verification system?
Yes, there are many certifications. At Victoria Ecosystems, we actually have one line that we love because it's true, it's who we are. It's don't trust the certifier, trust the data.
Oh, but
That's what we need.
it's the proof is in the pudding,
Exactly,
Yeah.
but that's what we need. I mean, there are so many environmental certifications out there. For example, carbon offsets. Come on, carbon offsets are a certification that someone is offsetting what you are emitting in terms of CO2.
Yeah.
So someone certifies that. The problem is there is bureaucracy,
Yeah.
and there are big problems, such as trying to plant a tree this size and selling you all the CO2 that small tree, tiny tree, is going to capture in the next 30 years.
Right.
They're selling future for present emissions, and that doesn't work. And no one can see the data because it's not open.
Well, so for example, there was a car company, which I won't mention, a few years ago, was allegedly, or I believe, convicted of lying about their CO2 emissions. In a system where we have DEV, would that be eliminated? Would there be transparency in being able to look at like either public companies or even private companies and their data associated?
See it this way. The company that first, in every sector, and we're already working with clients on different sectors, so the first companies that adopt DEV will have a huge competitive advantage.
Okay. So it's in their actually in their best interest
Of course.
to adopt EEV.
Of course. Imagine someone promises you X percentage of, I don't know, environmental policies, projects, whatever, sustainability, and opens the data. And someone tries to sell you a higher degree of that and doesn't open the data. Which will you choose?
Yeah, I'd like open source, I think.
Of course. So that's it. Huge competitive advantage is coming to the industries that actually, and the companies that open up to decentralized environmental verification.
Thank you. Very interesting. Any last questions before we wrap it up? Christopher, I want to thank you so much for being here. Fascinating stuff, and I look forward to chatting with you more about this. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, we're going to take a little pause for lunch, and we'll see you back here afterwards for our conference of the afternoon. Thanks so much.